Welcome to TB Dahl Audiobooks. Before the story begins, please take a quick second to subscribe and leave a comment below. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, enjoy the listen.
Maren Lunde arrived at the cafe 17 minutes after Riley's text. She didn't look like a woman who'd dropped everything. She looked like a woman who moved through life expecting interruptions. Tall blonde hair pulled into a low knot, reading glasses pushed up on her head. She wore a navy linen blazer over a white t-shirt, dark jeans, and flat leather boots that made no sound on the wooden floor. She carried a canvas bag that bulged with a laptop, 2 notebooks, and what appeared to be a hardback book wedged sideways. She scanned the room the way reporters did, not checking for threats but cataloguing the space. Who was here? Who was listening? How many tables separated private conversation from the counterstaff? Riley raised 2 fingers from the table. Maren crossed the room, pulled out a chair, and sat down without offering her hand or making small talk. "You're Riley Hunt. You remember." "I remember Tara introducing you at the Munch opening. You work at Ericsson and Lindgren. Political risk." Her eyes moved to the notes spread across the table. "Worked. You've seen the suspension. It's on their website. Your profile's gone. I checked after your message." Maren set her bag on the floor. "What's happening to Tara?" The question carried weight. Not casual concern, real pressure behind it. "Tara was taken 2 days ago in Oslo. 2 men, professional, no ransom demand. The terms we received came through a channel connected to Russian state intelligence." Maren's expression didn't change, but her hands went still on the table. "What terms?" "Surrender all documentation. Cease all media contact. In exchange, Tara is released and we're offered relocation under conditions we don't control." "You declined." "I'm sitting here." Maren looked at the notes again. She reached into her bag and pulled out one of the notebooks, flipping it open to a blank page. She uncapped a pen. "Start from the beginning." Riley laid it out in the order Maren would need. Not the order of discovery, but the order of evidence. She began with Henrik Rask, a 68-year-old retired archivist, publicly known as a museum consultant, specializing in provenance research and private collections. Found dead in the basement of the National Museum 6 days ago. The police report identified the death as suspicious. The media coverage named him, but disclosed no motive, no suspects, and no connection to anything beyond his professional career. Henrik Rask was a member of a network called Honest Russia. Riley said, founded in 1919 by Russian exiles. Their original purpose was preserving documents the Soviet state wanted destroyed. Birth records, witness accounts, letters, genealogies connected to the imperial family. Maren wrote without looking up. Monarchists. Some of them. The organization fractured over time. Some members wanted to protect evidence. Others wanted to use it politically. Others wanted to sell it. And Rask? Rask was a protector. He guarded something called File 17, an archive connected to a disputed bloodline descending from Grand Duke Michael Alexandrovich Romanov. Maren's pen stopped. The Tsar's brother. Nicholas abdicated in favor of Michael in 1917. Michael deferred acceptance to a constituent assembly that never met. He was murdered a month before the Tsar's family. File 17 documents a hidden child from that period. A concealed son moved through Finland into Scandinavia under a false identity. Riley paused. That bloodline reaches forward to the present. Elliot Harper and I are the living descendants. Maren set the pen down. "You're telling me you have a claim to the Russian throne." "No, I'm telling you that Russian state intelligence believes we do, and they've built an operation to erase us before we can prove it." The distinction landed. Riley watched Maren process it, the shift from spectacle to threat. "The story I'm bringing you isn't about a bloodline." Riley continued. "It's about a cover-up. The bloodline is the reason the cover-up exists. But the evidence I can show you is the systematic destruction of records, the murder of custodians, the fabrication of competing documents, a coordinated media campaign to frame us as extremists, institutional pressure on Norwegian authorities, and the kidnapping of a civilian to force our silence." Maren picked her pen back up. "Walk me through it, all of it." Riley took 40 minutes. She didn't rush, didn't embellish, didn't editorialize. She gave Maren the architecture, the envelopes delivered to her and Elliot, signed HR, initials that mapped to both Honest Russia and Henrik Rask. The museum basement. Rask's body. The handwritten reference to Brasovo, Michael Alexandrovich's estate. The break-in at Rask's apartment. The silver cross engraved AM 1918. The stolen custodian index that mapped every piece of File 17 across Europe. Katerina Volkova's revelation that Riley and Elliot were biological twins separated as infants. The photograph of 2 babies with handwritten initials on the back, SAN and MHN, Sophia Anna Nikolaisen and Mikael Henrik Nikolaisen. Their original names, the journey to Porvoo, the missing baptismal page, surgically removed from an Orthodox church archive that had survived a century intact, compromised only after the custodian index was stolen. The 2 versions of Michael's letter, one genuine, one forged by the restorationist faction leader Viktor Sokolov to inflate a protective note into a dynastic manifesto. The coordinated Russian media operation, articles seeded across platforms framing Honest Russia as extremists, Riley and Elliot as manipulated pawns, the documents as fabrications. The pressure on Norwegian institutions, PST opening an assessment, Eriksson and Lindgren's suspension, the construction industry newsletter reframing Elliot's military background, the Helsinki attack, Katerina slashed in a courtyard, Father Tobias Kusk in Tallinn found dead, his archive materials stolen, Tara taken from Oslo. When Riley finished, the cafe had emptied around them. The lunch crowd had cycled through and dispersed. 2 baristas talked quietly behind the counter. Afternoon light fell through the windows at a lower angle. Maren had filled 11 pages. She read through them once, slowly, then looked up. "The pattern is stronger than the claim." "That's the point. You're not asking me to prove you're Romanov descendants. You're asking me to document a state-backed operation to suppress evidence and silence witnesses on Norwegian soil, including the abduction of a Norwegian citizen." Maren closed the notebook. She pressed her palms flat against the cover. "I need to verify independently. Source documents, physical evidence, timelines I can cross-reference against known facts. If I publish this and anything collapses under scrutiny, it protects the people who took Tara." "I understand. Which means I need access to the original materials, not copies, not summaries, the actual documents, in a location where they can be examined and photographed under controlled conditions." Riley nodded. She'd anticipated this. "We're working on that." Her phone buzzed. "Elliot. Gear has something. Meet at Birkelunden West Bench in 40. Riley gathered the notes and slid them into the waterproof sleeve. Maren watched her pack up. "Where are you staying?" "Moving." Riley zipped her jacket. "I'll text you from this number. Keep it separate from your regular contacts." "I've been doing this for 12 years, Riley." "I know, that's why I'm here." Maren stood. She slung her bag over one shoulder and paused. "Tara talked about you, at the Munch opening. She said you were the smartest person she knew and the worst at asking for help." Riley's throat tightened. She was right about one of those. Birkelunden sat quiet in the afternoon. A few dog walkers crossed the gravel paths. A group of teenagers shared a bench near the fountain, their laughter carrying in the still air. The trees along the park's western edge cast long shadows across the grass. Elliot sat on the bench with his hands clasped between his knees. He wore a dark jacket Riley hadn't seen before, borrowed probably from Gear's supply of anonymous clothing. His expression was controlled, but his jaw was tight. Riley sat down beside him. Geir came through. Tell me. He works with a subcontractor who handles building maintenance for a company called Norse Secure Solutions, private security and record storage. They operate a facility on the southeast edge of the city, Alnabru industrial area. The building was originally a municipal archive annex, converted 6 years ago into what they market as a secure document storage and retrieval service. Record storage. That's the public-facing business. Climate-controlled vaults, corporate clients, law firms. Geir says the company has been expanding its footprint in Oslo's commercial storage sector. But the Alnabru facility stays quiet. Low traffic, small staff, restricted vehicle access. Elliot unfolded a hand-drawn diagram on his knee. The building is 2 stories above grade with a full basement level. Original construction is reinforced concrete. It was built in the 1970s to hold municipal archives. Thick walls, limited windows, controlled entry points. Riley studied the diagram. Perfect for holding someone. The basement level is the key. Geir's subcontractor was called in 8 months ago to install upgraded ventilation in the lower rooms. He wasn't allowed below the first stairwell landing. A separate crew, not local, handled the basement work, but he saw enough of the layout to sketch this. Elliot pointed to a rectangular space in the lower right corner of the diagram. Reinforced internal storage rooms, steel frame doors, electronic access controls that weren't part of the original building specs. Who owns Norse Secure Solutions? Registered in Norway. The beneficial ownership traces through 2 shell layers to a Cyprus entity. Geir couldn't get further, but the corporate structure matches what Katarina described. The FSB uses intermediary companies registered in neutral jurisdictions. How did Geir connect it to Tara? Elliot's jaw tightened again. Geir's brother-in-law drives a delivery van for a catering supply company. 2 days ago, a new order came in for the Alnabru facility. The order was unusual. Residential food items, toiletries, bedding supplies. Not the kind of stock a document storage business needs. The delivery instructions specified a ground-floor intake room, no contact with basement-level personnel. The driver noticed a sedan with diplomatic plates parked in the loading bay. He mentioned it to Geir's brother-in-law because diplomatic vehicles don't usually appear at industrial storage facilities. Riley felt her pulse quicken. She controlled it. That's circumstantial. It is, but Geir cross-checked the delivery address against the building permit records his subcontractor filed. The ventilation upgrade was registered as a climate control enhancement for archival materials. The specifications he saw don't match archival standards. They match habitable space requirements, air exchange rates, temperature controls, humidity parameters consistent with human occupancy. They built a holding facility and called it a records vault. The original building already had the bones for it. Reinforced concrete, limited access, controlled environment. They just upgraded the infrastructure to make it functional for something other than paper. Riley looked at the diagram again. 2 entrances above grade, a main door on the north side and a service entrance on the east. 1 stairwell connecting all 3 levels. An emergency exit on the west wall of the ground floor. The basement showed a single access point from the stairwell and a secondary utility corridor running to an exterior ventilation shaft. Can we get in? Not through the front. Geir says the main entrance has camera coverage and electronic locks. The service entrance is similar, but the utility corridor in the basement was part of the original municipal infrastructure. It connects to a maintenance access point in the adjacent lot, a drainage inspection chamber that predates the building's conversion. Geir's subcontractor used it to run cable. It's tight, but it's passable. When? Tonight, after the facility closes to regular clients. Geir says the daytime staff leaves by 6. Night security is 1 person, sometimes 2.
The story continues in the next chapter, so make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with fellow book lovers.
Industrial facility, Alnabru, may contain both the person and the evidence. Can you have a photographer and a second reporter on standby tonight? I'll send coordinates. The response came in 90 seconds. "I'll bring Kettle. He's shot conflict zones. Steady hands. Give me 2 hours." They reconvened at 7:15 in a parking lot 400 meters from the Al Nabru facility. The industrial area was quiet at this hour. Loading bays locked, offices dark, only the occasional security light throwing orange pools across empty asphalt. Maren arrived in a grey hatchback with Kjetil Strand, a wiry man in his 40s who wore a photographer's vest and carried 2 camera bodies in a padded bag. He shook Riley's hand without speaking and assessed the facility through a long telephoto lens from the car's passenger seat. "2 vehicles in the lot," he reported. "Dark sedan near the main door. White van at the loading bay. Ground floor lights on in the front office. Upper floor dark. No visible movement." Elliot spread the diagram on the car's hood, weighting the corners with stones. "Maren, you and Kjetil position here." He pointed to a low wall separating the adjacent lot from the facility's eastern perimeter. "You'll have sight lines to the main entrance and the loading bay. If anyone moves in or out, you document it." Maren nodded. "Riley and I enter through the utility corridor." Elliot traced the route on the diagram, across the adjacent lot, through the drainage inspection chamber, into the underground maintenance passage. "We come up inside the basement level. If Tara is here, I find her, and we get her out the same way we came in. Riley, your job is the evidence of motion." He paused at each junction, listening, then signaling with a flat palm or a pointed finger. The corridor branched once. He took the left fork, following the ventilation ducting that Gear's subcontractor had traced on his sketch. After 60 meters, the passage terminated at a steel door. No electronic lock. This was the original infrastructure, predating the conversion. The door had a manual deadbolt, rusted but functional. Elliot worked it with steady pressure until it gave. The door opened into a basement utility room. Fluorescent strips overhead, currently dark. Elliot killed his headlamp and waited for his eyes to adjust. Riley stood behind him, breathing through her mouth to stay quiet. Sounds filtered through the walls, the hum of climate control equipment, the distant vibration of a compressor, and something else. A rhythmic electronic tone, repeating at 3-second intervals. A security sensor or access system cycling. Elliot moved to the interior door and pressed his ear against it. Nothing on the other side. He opened it 2 centimeters and looked through the gap. A corridor, painted concrete walls, LED strip lighting at floor level, casting a low blue glow. 3 doors on the left side, 1 on the right. The corridor ended at a heavy fire door with a card reader mounted at shoulder height. The first door on the left was ajar. Elliot pushed it open. Empty. A small room with a desk, a chair, a water bottle. The desk held a laptop in sleep mode and a stack of brown folders. The second door was locked. Electronic keypad. Elliot tried the handle. Solid steel frame, no give. The third door was also locked. Same keypad system. The single door on the right was different. It was wider, heavier, and set into a reinforced frame. The lock was a commercial-grade electromagnetic system, the kind used for bank vaults and high-security archives. The access panel required a card and a code. Riley touched Elliot's arm and pointed. Beside the vault door, mounted at eye level, a small camera with a red indicator light, currently dark, either disabled or in standby mode. Elliot crouched and examined the vault door's lower edge. A thin line of light leaked from beneath it. Someone had left the interior lights on. He straightened, pointed to Riley, pointed to the vault, held up 5 fingers, then pointed to himself and moved toward the locked doors on the left. Riley understood. Elliot was going to find Tara. She had 5 minutes in the vault, if she could get it open. She examined the access panel. Card plus code. She didn't have either. But the panel had a manual override, a physical keyhole below the electronic display, standard in commercial installations for emergency or maintenance access. The key would be held by building management. Riley looked at the utility room they'd entered through. Maintenance access. Building management functions. She went back, searching shelves, hooks, electrical panels. In a grey metal cabinet mounted above the water shut-off valves, she found a ring of labelled keys. The labels were coded, B1, B2, B3, and one marked VLT. She took the ring. The VLT key fit the manual override. The electromagnetic lock disengaged with a deep mechanical thunk. The vault door shifted fractionally in its frame. Riley pulled it open. The room beyond was larger than she'd expected. 3 meters wide, 6 meters deep, with steel shelving on both walls and a central table under bright overhead lights. The air was cool and dry, proper archival climate control, functioning as designed. The shelves held labelled boxes. The table held documents, folders, photographs, and transparent evidence sleeves arranged in rows. Riley stepped inside and closed the door behind her to keep the corridor dark. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She made herself breathe, then looked at what was in front of her. Someone had organized this material with care. Not hastily, not as temporary storage. This was a working assembly, materials gathered from multiple sources, sorted, cross-referenced, and prepared for consolidation or transfer. Tags and handwritten annotations in both Russian and English marked each item. She started with the central table. The first item she recognized was a clear archival sleeve containing a single page. The paper was old, heavy, yellowed, with the texture of early 20th century ecclesiastical stock. Cyrillic script in a formal liturgical hand filled the upper portion. Below it, in darker ink and a different hand, additional notations. The baptismal record. Page 7 from the Porvoo archive. The page Father Alexei had found missing. Riley bent close. The entry listed a child baptized in the Orthodox faith during the winter of 1917 to 1918. The child's name, Alexei Mikhailovich. The mother, Elena Pavlovna Orlova. The father was identified only by initials. M.A.R. The annotation below, in a later hand, expanded the initials. Mikhail Alexandrovich Romanov. Riley photographed the page with the small camera Shetil had given her. Front and back. Close-up of the initials. Close-up of the annotation. She moved the camera slowly to avoid blur. Beside the baptismal record, in a second archival sleeve, lay a folded letter. The paper was fragile. The ink faded to a pale brown. The text was in Russian, written in a controlled hand that showed no sign of haste despite its brevity. 7 lines, exactly as Markham had described the genuine version. Riley didn't read Russian fluently, but she recognized enough words to identify the substance. The letter referred to a child. It used the word skrit, hidden. It spoke of a name that must not be carried until safety returned. It ended with a phrase she translated haltingly. Let him grow where winters are familiar and language is different. The real letter from Grand Duke Michael Alexandrovich, the one the restorationists had inflated with forged paragraphs about dynastic destiny and Romanov continuation. This original was restrained, protective, almost pleading. The handwriting of a man who knew he was unlikely to survive, asking that his child might. Riley photographed every centimetre of it. The next folder on the table was thicker, a modern clinical document bound with a paperclip. White cover sheet. No institutional logo, but a reference number in the upper right corner and a date from 11 months ago. Riley opened it. A DNA analysis report. 23 pages of methodology, results tables, marker comparisons, and a summary conclusion. The report compared 2 sample sets, Subject A and Subject B, identified in an appendix by the designations R17 and E17. Riley's chest went cold. The summary confirmed that subjects A and B were biological twins, dizygotic, sharing approximately 50% of genetic markers, consistent with full siblings born from the same parents. The maternal lineage was traced through mitochondrial DNA analysis. The report noted that the maternal haplogroup was consistent with a specific Eastern European population cluster, previously identified in published genetic studies of Romanov-related individuals. The language was careful. The report did not state that Riley and Elliot were Romanov descendants. It stated that their maternal genetic markers were consistent with and could not exclude descent from the family line associated with the House of Romanov through the maternal lineages documented in comparative studies. Not a clean legal claim, but a scientific document that said their blood matched what the historical record predicted. Riley turned to the appendix. Sample collection dates, sample sources. The maternal reference material had been obtained from, she read the entry twice, archived biological material held by a private collection in Finland, cross-referenced against published Romanov mitochondrial DNA profiles from the 2007 to 2009 identification studies. Someone had done this work properly. Years of quiet collection, comparison, verification. Not a hasty test. A patient, methodical confirmation. Riley photographed every page. In a separate box on the left shelf, she found a sealed envelope. The paper was recent, modern stationery, cream-colored, with a weight and texture that reminded her of the envelopes that had started everything. But this one was larger, and the seal had been opened cleanly along the top edge. Inside, a handwritten letter. 4 pages. The script was fluid, feminine, and written with the kind of intensity that showed in variable pressure, heavier on certain words, lighter where the pen moved fast. Riley read the first line and stopped breathing. "My dear children." She gripped the edge of the table. "If you are reading this, the decision I made to protect you has either succeeded or failed, and I cannot know which until I see your faces again. I pray that is still possible. I know it may not be." Anna Nicolaison's letter. The letter Henrik Rask had placed in a deposit box, the one someone had accessed using his compromised authorization codes. The letter Riley had been told contained names, dates, and the identity of the first person to betray File 17. She read it standing up, unable to sit, unable to move. "Your names are Sophia Anna Nicolaisen and Mikael Henrik Nicolaisen. You were born on September 14th, 1999, in Oslo, in a hospital where the attending physician was a friend of your father's and knew to list false information on the public birth registration. You were healthy, you were beautiful, you were together. Your father is Henrik Voss. He is a journalist who spent his career believing that the truth protects people. I loved him for that belief. I am no longer certain he was right. I am Anna Nicolaisen. I am a researcher. What I researched eventually was my own family. I found anomalies in the genealogical records my grandfather kept, names that didn't match civil registrations, travel documents that listed routes no civilian would take, a silver cross inscribed with initials that meant nothing to me until I began searching the right archives. What I found is documented in File 17. What I found is that my grandfather's father was born during the collapse of Imperial Russia to a woman named Elena Pavlovna Orlova and a man whose full name was never written down, only his initials, M.A.R. I did not seek this. I did not want it. By the time I understood what it meant, I had already attracted the attention of people who considered it their property. Riley turned the page. Her hands trembled. Honest Russia told me they would keep you safe. They told me the separation was temporary, a precaution while they resolved internal disagreements about what to do with the evidence. Henrik and I agreed because we believed we had no other choice. We were told the Russian state had identified the research. We were told our names were on a list. We were told the children would be returned to us when it was safe. The separation was not temporary. I do not know, as I write this, whether Henrik is still alive. I have not been able to reach him for 7 weeks. I do not know whether the people who promised to protect you have kept that promise or broken it. I know only that I need you to understand. You were not abandoned. You were taken from us by people who believed control was the same thing as safety. Your blood connects you to a history that others want to use, erase, or deny. That is their concern. You are my concern. If you find each other, and I hope with everything in me that you do not let anyone tell you what your lives are for. Not the people who hid you, not the people who hunt you, not the state that wants you silent, not the organization that thinks your blood belongs to a cause. You belong to yourselves. Whatever you decide to do with the truth, make it your decision. I love you. I have loved you since before you were born. I have loved you every day since they took you from me. I will love you in whatever form I exist when you read this, whether I am beside you or somewhere you cannot reach. Your mother, Anna Riley, set the letter on the table. She pressed both palms flat against the surface and lowered her head. Her shoulders shook once. She clenched her jaw until the muscles ached and forced herself still. She photographed the letter. All 4 pages, front and back. Then she placed it carefully back in the envelope and put the envelope in her jacket, against her chest. The remaining materials on the shelves filled in the architecture of the conspiracy. A partial copy of the Custodian Index, not the complete original, but a working reconstruction that showed entries for each evidence custodian across 7 countries. Names, locations, deposit methods, access protocols. Henrik Rask's entry was highlighted. Father Tobias Kusk in Tallinn, crossed out with a date beside it. The date of his death. Pavel Orlov's name appeared in the index margins. Handwritten annotations, not Rask's hand, not Katerina's, connected Orlov's access dates to the subsequent compromises. Someone in Volkov's network had used Orlov as a decoder, walking the index entry by entry and mapping the extraction sequence. Riley photographed every page of the index reconstruction. She counted the custodian entries, 14 in total. 9 had been marked as compromised or eliminated. 5 remained unmarked, either not yet reached or deliberately omitted. On the bottom shelf, in a sealed plastic case, she found a small digital recorder. A label on the case read, in handwriting she now recognized as Henrik Rask's precise script, for R17 and E17, to be delivered upon contact. Riley pressed play. Henrik Rask's voice filled the vault, quiet, measured, and heavy with the particular weight of a man recording something he expected others to hear only after his death. This is Henrik Rask. The date is the 14th of March, this year. I am recording this because I no longer believe I will be able to deliver the information in person. A pause. The sound of a man adjusting his position in a chair. If you are listening, then you are Riley and Elliot. Or you are someone who has recovered this recording from my effects. If you are the latter, I ask that you pass it to the 2 people it was made for. Another pause. Longer. I helped separate you. I want to say that first because it is the thing I owe you most directly. I authenticated the documents that created your new identities. I verified the adoption arrangements. I confirmed that the families chosen for you were safe, stable, and had no connection to honest Russia or to Russian émigré networks. I believed I was protecting you. His voice thinned. I was protecting evidence. I told myself it was the same thing. It was not. Riley heard footsteps in the corridor outside the vault. She stopped the recording and held still. The footsteps passed. She waited 30 seconds, then pressed play again. File 17 was breached 13 months before the date of this recording. I believe the breach originated with Pavel Orlov, a member of the organization's financial wing. Orlov had access to the Northern Table's authentication records. I believe he copied the Custodian Index during a visit to my apartment and subsequently sold it to a Russian state-connected buyer. I do not know who Orlov's contact was within the Russian security apparatus. I suspect it was Colonel Sergei Volkov of the Federal Security Service, who has run counterintelligence operations targeting Russian émigré networks for at least 15 years. Volkov understands that File 17 is not a legal threat. It is a narrative threat. He does not need to disprove your bloodline. He needs to make it unusable. The custodian index gives Volkov a map. With it, he can target each piece of evidence separately. He can steal, destroy, forge, or discredit the material before anyone assembles it into a coherent record. A sound on the recording. Rask clearing his throat. I decided to warn you directly because the organization can no longer protect you. The keepers are compromised. The reformists are compromised. The restorationists are preparing to reveal you without your knowledge or consent. The opportunists have already sold you. I am sending you letters. I know this seems old-fashioned and perhaps reckless. But the people watching us expect digital communication. They do not expect paper. A longer silence. There is one more thing I must say. It concerns your parents. Riley's grip tightened on the recorder. Anna Nikolaisen and Henrik Voss did not abandon you. They did not choose to leave you. They were removed from the situation by people within honest Russia who believed the family unit was too visible and too vulnerable. I was told they would be relocated to safety. I was told they agreed to temporary separation. I no longer believe either of those statements was true. I have spent 3 years searching for evidence of their current location or status. I have found nothing. The records held by the Northern Table concerning their relocation were destroyed in a fire that was classified as accidental. I do not believe it was accidental. If you find your parents, or if you find what happened to them, I ask you to remember that they fought for you. They fought against people who should have been their allies. They lost. I am sorry for what I did, for what I failed to do, for the years you spent apart when you should have been together. Keep each other close. The recording ended. Riley stood in the vault for a long time. The recorder's display showed the timestamp frozen at 7 minutes and 12 seconds. The room hummed with climate control. She photographed the recorder and the label. Then she placed it in her jacket beside Anna's letter. The vault door opened. Elliot filled the frame. Behind him, holding his arm, her face drawn and pale but her eyes sharp and present, stood Tara Morgan. Riley crossed the vault in 3 steps. She wrapped her arms around Tara and held on. Tara's body was thin under the borrowed sweatshirt she wore. Her hair was unwashed. Her wrists showed red marks from restraints that had been removed recently. "You came," Tara said. Her voice was hoarse and quiet. "You absolute idiot, you came." "I came." Tara pulled back and looked at Riley's face. Whatever she saw there made her expression shift, from relief to something harder. "You've been crying. I found my mother's letter." Tara's eyes widened. Elliot stepped into the vault and scanned the shelves, the table, the organized rows of evidence. "How long have you been in here?" 22 minutes. "Security." "1 guard on the ground floor. I found Tara in the second locked room. The guard was asleep at his desk. I used zip ties from the utility room." He looked at the materials on the table. "What is all this?" "Everything." Elliot moved to the table and looked down at the baptismal record, the DNA report, the custodian index reconstruction. He picked up the archival sleeve containing Michael's letter and held it under the light. "This is the real one." 7 lines, just like Markham described. He set it down. They gathered it all in one place. He said, "For transfer." This was a consolidation point. Volkov's network collected the pieces from across Europe and brought them here to be packaged before moving them out of Norway. Once it left the country, it would disappear into a Russian archive or be destroyed. Elliot looked at the index reconstruction. The crossed-out names, the dates. "Father Kusk," he said. "Dead. His entry is marked." Elliot's face hardened. He turned to the shelves and began photographing systematically. Box labels, folder tabs, annotation marks, shelf positions. He worked fast and thorough. the way he worked a construction site, documenting conditions before anyone could claim they'd been different. Tara leaned against the wall. What happens now? Now we get you out, Elliot said. Then Riley calls Maren. Maren's already outside, Riley said. She's been documenting the exterior for the last 30 minutes. They moved through the corridor and back into the utility room. Tara followed Elliot through the maintenance passage. Her breathing was unsteady, but she kept pace. Riley carried Anna's letter, the recorder, and the camera full of photographs. She left the originals in the vault. It was the hardest decision she'd made in 6 days. The originals were evidence. Removing them risked chain of custody challenges. Leaving them meant Volkov's people might destroy them before authorities arrived. But Riley needed the story to hold. Maren needed photographs she could publish. The police needed materials in situ. She left them. They climbed the iron rungs and emerged into the cold night air. Elliot replaced the steel plate over the inspection chamber. Tara stood in the open, tilting her face up toward the sky. She breathed deeply, and her eyes closed. Maren appeared around the corner of the adjacent building, Kjetil behind her. She saw Tara and stopped. Maren, Tara said. Maren crossed the distance and put her hands on Tara's shoulders. She examined Tara's face, her wrists, her eyes. Are you hurt? Nothing permanent. Maren looked at Riley. What did you find? Riley pulled out the camera. Everything Volkov has been collecting. The baptismal record from Porvu, a DNA analysis linking us to Romanov-related genetic markers, a letter from our biological mother, the original Michael Alexandrovich letter, a partial reconstruction of the custodian index, and a recording from Henrik Rask made before his murder. Maren took the camera. She looked at it for a moment, then at Riley. He gathered it all in one place. His operation was designed to collect and consolidate before destroying or transferring. He needed everything assembled to confirm what he had. The same process that let him target each piece separately gave us a single location where the complete record existed. How long before someone realizes you were inside? The guard was secured but conscious. An hour, maybe less. Maren turned to Kjetil. Download everything from this camera. Back it up to 3 separate locations, encrypted cloud, physical drive, and 1 copy to the editor's safe at the office. Kjetil took the camera and moved to the car. Maren looked back at Riley. I need to call the police. This is a crime scene. Abduction, unlawful detention, stolen property, potential espionage activity on Norwegian soil. If I don't report it, the evidence becomes tainted. Call them, but publish simultaneously. The moment this enters official channels, diplomatic pressure starts. Volkov's people will claim the materials are Russian state property or classified intelligence. Norwegian authorities will be asked to seal everything. I can have the first piece online within an hour. Front page print by morning. The cover-up is the story, not the bloodline. Maren met her eyes. Riley, when those photographs go live, the DNA report, the baptismal record, your mother's letter, the bloodline becomes the story too. You understand that? Riley looked at Tara, who sat on the ground beside the car, drinking water from a bottle Kjetil had given her. She looked at Elliot, who stood at the perimeter of the lot, scanning the approach roads. She looked at the facility behind them, a grey concrete building where a century of hidden evidence had been gathered by the very people who wanted to erase it. I know. Are you ready for that? Riley reached inside her jacket and touched the edge of Anna's letter. You belong to yourselves. Whatever you decide to do with the truth, make it your decision. Publish it. Elliot returned from his perimeter check. No movement on the access road. We have maybe 40 minutes before the guard works free or someone checks in. Riley nodded. She stood beside the car and looked at the facility one last time. Volkov had spent months building this operation. He had used stolen intelligence to locate every fragment of File 17, scattered across Europe. He had sent operatives to churches, archives, deposit boxes, and private collections. He had killed at least 2 custodians. He had kidnapped a civilian. He had pressured institutions, seeded media campaigns, forged documents, and turned an entire organization's century of secrecy against itself. And in doing all of that, he had done the one thing honest Russia's fractured factions never could. He had assembled File 17, every piece, in one room, in one country, under one roof. The evidence that Grand Duke Michael Alexandrovich's bloodline had survived. The evidence that Anna Nikolaisen and Henrik Voss had found it. The evidence that their children had been taken, separated, renamed, and hidden. The evidence that an FSB colonel had orchestrated a cross-border operation to destroy all of it before anyone could read it as a single, coherent story. Volkov's mistake was not cruelty. His mistake was completeness. He had built the archive that proved his own cover-up. Riley got in the car. Elliot started the engine. Tara sat in the back seat, wrapped in a blanket from Marin's trunk, her head resting against the window. Marin and Kjetil followed in the hatchback. They drove towards the city. Behind them, the facility sat dark and still. Inside it, under lights that no one had turned off, the complete record of File 17 waited on a table in a vault that a Russian intelligence operation had built to hold the truth until it could be erased. The truth was still there. And by morning, so would the cameras.
The story continues in the next chapter, so make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with fellow book lovers.